10 years in the making, Damien Hirst's latest major exhibition presents an audacious and intricate collection of around 190 works that troubles the fault lines between truth and lies and history and myth. To begin untangling its countless tendrils, my paper considers ways that myths, ancient and new, are staged and performed in the exhibition, including in specific works and how those works came to be there. I'm also touching on the potentiality of the pensive actor viewer's performance as skeptic and detective. We are told by the exhibition text that Treasures from the Wreck of the Unbelievable consists of a vast array of ancient coral-encrusted sculptures recovered from the Indian Ocean and presented alongside contemporary replications and like-themed editions made of bronzes, precious stones and metals. Photographic and documentary evidence of their recovery appears throughout. The exhibition is displayed across the Punta della Dogana, Venice's former customs house, and the Palazzo Grassi, a former private family palace. These vast venues are largely owned and operated as exhibition sites by the French billionaire and art collector François Pinault. They are operated by his foundation. Viewers can explore in whatever order they wish, but the guide determines an order that begins in the Dogana. The entry text on the wall before entering the Dogana's galleries, which is reproduced in the available guide booklet, and these all come in English, French or Italian versions, establishes a link with the theatrical before outlining the show's context. Relevant sounding lines from The Tempest provide an epigraph to the whole exhibition. Although these lines are attributed to William Shakespeare as author, they are sung by the supernatural, shape-shifting entity Ariel, who under a shroud of invisibility convinces Ferdinand that his father Alonso, the King of Naples, has died in a shipwreck that Ariel staged upon Prospero's command. These are two of many instances of theatrical artifice performing narrative functions within the play, an approach which also maps onto how the exhibition unfolds. Ferdinand's unquestioning belief in on-evidence claims that his father has transformed into something otherworldly through his apparent death at sea in his staged shipwreck reflects the performance of truth and lies in the exhibition. The recovered artefacts left encrusted from their 2 millennia on the seabed apparently lend truth to the myth of their existence, their collection and their transportation on the fated ship, the Epistos. While this term is claimed to be ancient Greek for unbelievable, there can be more to the meaning. It can refer to an untrustworthy person, an unbeliever, a disbeliever. It can be as specific as being faithless because you are unpersuaded of the existence of a God, and to actively disbelieve in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. A subliminal challenge is set then to unbelieve the exhibition's claims, to question the documentary photography that, given the excessive economics of the show, could easily be staged using various production and post-production methods, and to consider every work to be a simulacrum until hard evidence shows otherwise. Until this is provided, we must understand the discovery and resurrection of the Epistos' cargo 2,000 years into the Common Era, as opposed to Anno Domini, as a physicalized extension of the myth of the Epistos. The active viewer does not have to look far to begin their journey as an epistivist, a term coined by a young YouTuber that's growing traction to refer to people who do not use faith to know things. As many reviewers of the show have pointed out, the name of the collector, the freed slave, Siphamotin II, is an anagram for I am a fiction. The text soon refers to the discovery in the Indian Ocean of his art collection so excessive it sank a ship that was a feat of engineering, the Titanic of its day, except no trace of the ship has been found. Just as the artifacts, which are conveniently stood upright, none of which have landed close enough together to appear in the same frame of wide-angled photography documenting the recovery, and these are sites that are also close enough to the surface that daylight can easily illuminate the ocean, and yet these were never found before. This image on screen of Proteus is an example of a photograph that I strongly suspect results from compositing and the use of studio tanks and so on. But I need to dig more into that for some harder evidence. Finally, the opening text refers to the recovered artifacts and their copies. I'll look at how myths therein are staged and performed using the Hydra and Kali series, which pit the water monster from Greco-Roman mythology against the Hindu goddess of time, death and creation. The first sculpture follows the undersea for 2,000 years trope, with its layers of coloured coral, barnacles and sea worms. The two photographs displayed in light boxes within this space are entitled Hydra and Kali Beneath the Waves and Hydra and Kali Discovered by Four Divers. These images of staged scenes perform the role of indexical proof that this partial sculpture, partial in that some of Kali's swords made of bronze have somehow apparently broken or rotted away without trace, was on the sunken ship and had landed base first on the seabed, far from any of the other artifacts. Again, there's an elaborate lighting setup here to illuminate the ocean floor, and the photographs in which divers tend to make contact directly with artifacts throughout the exhibition are quite sparse, and I'll reveal one that's quite telling towards the end. These dramatic, otherworldly images have been used extensively in publicity for the exhibition, creating an air of wonder, power and intrigue in the story of the collector, ship and the great many works that cannot be attributable to any named sculptors. The guide description for the found Hydra and Kali sculpture suggests possible readings for the viewer, which help the viewer, I think, bring it to life, give it movement in a way, and is also perhaps an example of ekphrasis, in which the work of art is discussed within a work of art, and that's only if we count the guide as an extension of it, which I very much would. Without mentioning Kali specifically, and I'll explain a bit about her shortly, the text states that representations of the all-encompassing cosmic nature of a deity through a multiplicity of limbs is an Indian practice that dates from the Kushan period, 2nd century BCE to 3rd century CE. According to ancient world historian Michael Scott, the Kushan Empire was Central Asian, largely surrounding where Afghanistan is today, and the Kushans pushed into northern India in the 1st century Common Era. Also, according to the New World Encyclopedia, this empire began in the 1st century Common Era and was heavily influenced by Indo-European and Greek languages and cultures that reached as far east as China. Furthermore, Greek and Indian deities such as Heracles and the Indic Shiva appeared on Kushan coins, both of which happen to be the respective corresponding entities associated with the figures about to do battle in the sculpture. The guide claims that the multiple-headed serpent features in Hindu mythology. Nagas are demigods appearing in Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, associated with water, and are often keepers of treasure. Although it doesn't exactly match descriptions in the Greek myths, the creature in the sculpture is named after the Greek Hydra. Hercules' second of 12 labours was to defeat the Lernaean Hydra. Using the Roman name of Hydra's mythological adversary, Hercules, rather than Heracles, the guide explains the regenerative nature of the creature's heads, which it states has led to the monster's associative relationship with an endlessly repeating task, which is a reading applicable to the exhibition in that the works are repeatedly replicated with variations, and with no true original, they are all simulacra. In poet Robert Graves's accounts of the Greek myths, the Hydra's crushed heads replicate double or triple folds. In the exhibition, this regrowth occurring during a repetitive battle is embodied by the variations of the scene revealed across time as the viewer moves through and bears witness to Kali's unfinished business with Hydra. For instance, Kali's legs and two of her arms are positioned differently in the silver miniature in Palazzo Grassi. Finally, the guide suggests a reading reminiscent of early 20th century modernist paintings, reproducing the kind of stilled moving images inspired by Merle's late 19th century photographic experiments in capturing movement. Rather than being frozen an instant before a violent clash, the figure's multiple arms and heads can be viewed as expressions of movement during the battle. The stop-motion sequences from Jason and the Argonauts with a familiar-looking Hydra helps to visualise this idea, and this is a cine and pop culture literate exhibition. What disrupts that reading, however, is that close inspection of the replica positioned beside the discovered sculpture, but which faces the opposite direction, making comparison quite tricky, reveals that each of Kali's swords is different and may even be familiar to fans of Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Highlander, countless samurai movies, so on and so forth. So this input from film and television culture reveals another mixture of East and West. Kali appears to wield each of these swords expertly. Her stance is confident, and she is fearless as she faces up to the Hydra. Historian of Hindu deities Elizabeth Harding explains that Kali's name comes from the word Kala, or time. She is the power of time which devours all. She is standing in a challenging posture on the prostrate body of her husband Shiva. Kali cannot exist without him, and Shiva cannot reveal himself without her. She is the manifestation of Shiva's power, energy. While Shiva's collection is pure white, Kali is the colour of the darkest night, a deep bluish black. Kali embodies the ambivalences and themes around time and death, creation and destruction that emerge in Hirst's back catalogue of work. While this depiction of Kali follows more typical impressions of her in Indian sculpture, with a normal woman's naked body, and the nakedness meaning that she is clad in space, there are some inversions here. Her hair is usually dishevelled to symbolise Kali's boundless freedom, but here it is pulled back neatly, and I think there are questions to be asked about Hirst's control over things and his taming of the natural world. Although naked, she normally wears a garland of severed heads or a skirt of severed arms in depictions, but here she has no adornments. She is usually depicted with her left foot forward, but each version in the exhibition has her right foot forward. She tends also to have 3 eyes, 4 arms, and the multiple arms represent her capacity for work, indeed her ability to perform endlessly repeating tasks, and a protruding tongue. But here she has 2 eyes, 6 arms, and her mouth is closed. She looks quite defiant and controlled, which I think is more that we can tease out. Harding explains further meanings in Callie's posture. Looking at Callie's right, we see good, and looking at her left, we see bad. A benign Callie is distinguished from a fearful Callie by the position of her feet. If Callie steps out with her right foot, as she does in the exhibition, she is benign and protective. Callie's impending battle with Hydra in these sculptures displaces Heracles from the myth of his second labour. We tend to associate Heracles, or Hercules, with strength, bravery and determination. But a demigod who needs his nephew's assistance to defeat this creature, being replaced with a female Hindu deity, potentially emasculates one of the Western world's most referenced symbols of masculinity. The fact that, other than her multiple arms, her physique is that of an ordinary, unarmoured woman facing up to the huge, multi-headed Hydra without fear or assistance adds to this. The substitution of Heracles with Callie also calls to mind contemporary film adaptations in which women perform the heroic roles, or perhaps at a stretch, recent gender-blind castings of Shakespeare plays with women in roles of power. While it is tempting to imagine Callie winning this battle, these adversaries are positioned in stasis before contact. Their drama is held in anticipation, and the rebooted legend only continues in the minds of viewers who might imaginatively take it to natural conclusions in the arena of the mind. And I have come across some quite fun online fan fiction inspired by some of the works. The substitution of Heracles with Callie also imagines and performs the links between Eastern and Western ancient worlds that Scott argues have been long severed by historical separatism. Rather than being a postmodern remix, these figures appropriated from their own myths and transposed into a new hybrid one potentially embodies exchanges between Eastern and Western ancient worlds that separatist historical records imply did not happen. This, of course, is quite reduced, and there's a lot more to this argument, but for the sake of a conference paper, that's a kind of idea that we can think about here. It's important, I think, to see that staging a moment of tension before a battle that can never happen may suggest that this is a conflict between East and West that never happened, or indeed is impending. This kind of stalled, impending violence emerges elsewhere in the exhibition, for example in the staging of Andromeda chained to the cliff, as a Spielbergian sea monster lunges from the depths, and of course sharks, which are preserved, appear in Hirst's earlier work. Perhaps this scene epitomises the potential for contemporary myths to consume ancient myths, but again, it is stilled before that can happen, and they coexist in tension. While the capacity to perform these violent encounters is prevented in these sculptures, and it's important to point out, there are other sculptures which are caught in the full throes of violent actions. Hirst performing the persona of the hubristic collector in possession of excessive wealth is present in the exhibition's convergence of real and mythical worlds. Like Prospero in The Tempest, the Hirst persona in the myths surrounding the exhibition is taking revenge on those who hurt or doubted him. In the role of dramaturg, he has staged excessive, big-budget theatrical wonders with just enough kernels of truth to allow passive spectators to suspend disbelief. And I did hear many other visitors believing and accepting absolutely the exhibition's artifices as true. For the active spectator performing the role of investigative unbeliever, identifying the theatrical aspects of life and art and where they might intermingle, can reveal hidden, unexpected truths. The theatrical aspects of the exhibition draw attention to the ways museums often appropriate artefacts and stories from cultures and present them in reductive, othered ways. They also show what can be achieved with an unrestrained budget, imagination, access to materials, and the right contacts. When embarking on this voyage, Hirst and his team could not have known how prescient any of these things would be in the light of 2017's Theatre of Politics. The exhibition is an addition to a long history of fake documentary, and I'm saying that as opposed to mockumentary. I mean documentary posing as real documentary when in fact it is fake. For example, Louis Buñuel's Land Without Bread. And these kinds of films tend to undertake a social responsibility in showing that we ought to distrust the information around us. I feel strongly as a media scholar, as a scholar of film and visual culture, and I implore the rest of you out there to feel the same, that it is our duty to lead in critical thinking and show how mediatisation can be unravelled and why it should be. While divisive, this exhibition, from attached to Damien Hirst's name, provides a useful demonstrative case study for that, as well as, for me, a fun and geeky way to examine aspects of theatricality and the arts. There's an awful lot more to say about this exhibition, and I'm planning to write a lot more about it, and as I research it and think about it and ponder on it, I'm sure many more interesting things will emerge. The economics of the show are fascinating. The mise en abîme in the show is fascinating. And there's a lot more to go through. But for now, these are just some thoughts that I've had, and any feedback or ideas are very welcome. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.